I want to bring a gentleman to the stage who I finally am meeting. So many people know him. I'm finally getting to know him. His name is Gabe Abelson, 5 years head monologue writer for Late Show with David Letterman, where he got 5 Emmy nominations. He was a staff writer for The Tonight Show with Leno, Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher. It just goes on and on and on. He teaches monologue writing to people currently working for Jimmy Kimmel, Michael Platt, the producer and head writer of Grace and Frankie. I mean, it just goes on, and writers for The Daily Show. And he currently teaches in Los Angeles. And here joining me from Los Angeles, the gifted Gabe Abelson, boys and girls.
Thank you. Good to see you.
I'm glad that you're finally here and we finally get to virtually meet. I'm
so glad. I can't believe it's taken this long.
I know, it's been sad. So what do you think about Carl Reiner's passing? Such an icon, huh?
Yeah, you know, it's always, you say this is the end of an era, and he was just, you know, he was so vibrant until the very end, and so I mean, his legacy, I don't even know where to begin. Starting with a stand-up comic.
Well, as people say, the Irish people say he was a real mensch, you know.
Yes, that he was.
The Irish
you know, Brooks gives him pretty much all the credit for the funny. Even though Carl was the straight man, Mel said that Carl was the brains of the outfit. Of course, Mel's got a brilliant mind himself, but that was a very generous thing to say. Yeah.
Well, they're all in the writing room working for Sid Caesar's, your show of shows back in the day, really like at the birth of all this comedy stuff. Anyway,
absolutely. The very beginning.
On to you, Gabe Abelson. Tell me, you grew up where? I have a bit of your trajectory here that fascinates me.
I grew up actually in what George Carlin calls White Harlem, 123rd between Broadway and Amsterdam. In fact, on the next block, and in fact, when I was a child, George had already moved out to LA, but his mother, who was already elderly, in her 80s probably, would sit down on the benches. I lived in this sort of landscape development, and I didn't even know, this was way before I even had interest in comedy. She would tell me stories about her son, George. And then when I became a comic, she had passed, but it was only then that I realized who she was. And I had worked with as a stand-up with all of Carlin's contemporaries, not all, but many of them, Robert Klein and David Brenner, all these people, but I'd never worked with George. Yeah. And so years later, I was doing Caroline's Comedy Hour for A&E, and the producer had just done something with George. And I said, I've never written a letter in my life. I would love to write a letter. It's not, yes, it's a fan letter, but also that I knew his mom and all this stuff. And so she said, well, here's a post office box. And I wrote, and I left my contact information. And about maybe 2 months later, my wife comes running into my office. She goes, oh my God, George Carlin's on the phone. And mind blown. And we talked for about 2 hours. And, you know, I put stuff in the letter so he would know that I actually knew his mother, that there was no things, that it wasn't just some random fan letter.
Right, details, secrets.
Yeah, details.
Could know.
That no one could know.
I had the pleasure, here I am name dropping, but it's not. It's just, you look at things that you've gotten to do. And I had the pleasure of interviewing George Carlin twice. And I was so taken with his humility, with his interest in you and the interest of what you were doing, blown away by him. What was your experience talking to him?
We mostly talked about the neighborhood. Like he would say, oh, is this bar there? Is this place still there? Is this guy still? And there were a couple of guys in the neighborhood that I knew of his generation, but that still lived in the neighborhood. And then everything came full circle years later. Well, and then when I was a teenager, way before I wrote this letter to George, in between meeting his mother and then, I bought all of his albums, and he was my favorite comic. And then finally, when I was at Letterman in the late 90s, I finally met him when he did a spot on the show, which it sort of everything had come back around. It was great.
So what stayed with me about all that is, wow, there was landscaped housing in that area.
Yes, Morningside Gardens. It was a development of I can't count, 6 buildings, in which I lived in 5 of them. I lived there for the first 42 years of my life.
What was it called?
Morningside Gardens.
And it was gorgeous.
Yeah, in Morningside Heights is the area. Morningside Gardens is this private development of 6 buildings that was landscaped. I mean, eventually, when I lived there with my family, we had a 3-bedroom there, and you look out any of our windows, all you saw were trees and rolling hills. You would have no idea that you were in Harlem or New York City. It was very unique, a unique place to grow up.
Is it still there, Gabe?
It is. It is. And I had my apartment there until a few years ago, in fact.
Because I'm close to there. I'm very close to Columbia up there. So.
Oh, cool. What street?
102nd West End.
No, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, well, I'm making the bucks doing my little internet show.
Very nice. You must go to Riverside Park a lot.
I love Riverside Park. It's my favorite park in Manhattan. So many people come. They don't know it. I love running there. There's tennis courts. You can bike up to the George Washington Bridge. It's magic. It's magic. But I escaped to California during this crazy virus. Gabe Abelson, what I read about you, you were doing stand-up in New York, I assume. You got a warm-up job. And people who don't know what a warm-up job is in stand-up, you warm up the audience. You go out there and get their energy going. Hey, guys, we're going to have so-and-so coming on in a minute. Keep your energy up overall. So how did you go from stand-up comic to warm-up act for
the show Politically Incorrect?
Mm-hmm.
The executive producer, Scott Carter, I knew from stand-up at the Comic Strip. That was our home club. And I knew Bill a little bit as a comic, but again, he was sort of right before me. He'd already, moved on. And so it's the toughest job for a stand-up is warm-up. And for that show in particular, because it's a roundtable argument going on behind you, so you're trying to keep the audience warmed up during the commercial. It's not like the argument stops. It gets more heated. So they want to see the argument. So for some reason, after doing stand-up for 14 years, it had never hit me. I watched his monologue one night. I go, I think maybe I can write the joke. And I said to Scott, what do I do if I want to write a joke for Bill? He said, well, we have a fax team. He said, it's kind of a thankless job because we look to our staff writers and you'll be writing a lot of jokes in the hopes of getting one on. And Bill only does 6 jokes in the monologue. And so I thought, what the heck? I tried it. And the very first night I tried it, half the monologue was mine. And then to watch it on TV was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. I was a comic, I had nothing to do during the day, and now I had actual work I could do during the day that I loved. So
do you remember your first joke you got on air?
I don't remember my very first joke that I got on Maher. I do remember the first joke I got on Letterman. But anyway, so this went on. They put me on a retainer after like 3 weeks, meaning not a staff job, but we're going to guarantee you whatever it was, $400 a week. I had proved some value to them, and it was great. I was over the moon because remember, by this time, by the mid-90s, the comedy clubs were already in decline in terms of the type of living you would make.
Right. So that's when I got in. Yeah. I got into
perfect timing. And so that I did that until I moved to LA. They cut the fax program. And then I happened to be doing a one-night gig with a great comedian, God rest her soul, Adrienne Tolsch.
I know Adrienne so well. God rest her soul. Adrienne Tolsch. You guys, she married to Bill Chef.
She was. Who was there and who was instrumental, really, in my career. So I gave Adrienne my writing packet. I said, "Do you think Letterman might, like this?" She said, "These are funny jokes. Call Bill." I did. Same thing. Put me on the fax team. Within a couple of months,
what's the fax team?
The fax team is you. In addition to staff writers, the monologue. You can't do this with the rest of the show. Just with monologue. Some shows will have a team of faxers that will fax jokes independently. If they sell a joke, they get $50 or $75 if it's, I think, CBS. And then the retainer thing was a special thing. There were only like 5 people on the retainer, where it was like $500 a week, meaning, again, not a staff, not a WGA job, not a union job. But that's how I started. But within about a year of doing all of this, and Letterman was the only show, late night show, where the staff didn't write monologue. Only one person on staff did, and that was Bill Chef. So I never thought there'd be any movement at Letterman. I never thought I'd get a job there. And I didn't have a career plan. I never have. And one day, out of the blue, Chef calls me and says, "I'm leaving the show to write a book. Would you be interested in my job?" No, I'd rather go to the Chuckle Hut in Minneapolis. Nah, writer Letterman, not for me. 14 years on the road, 15 years on the road. So I interviewed along with the other retainer guys, and I think it's the only time in entertainment where my age helped me. I was already old. I was in my 30s. Everybody else was in their 20s, and I got the job there, even though 5 guys interviewed, but I was the only stand-up of those 5 guys. And I think Dave wanted someone who knew that feeling of having their ass on the line, being out there alone every night, which, Chef was too. He was a veteran stand-up. So I think that was a big reason that I got the gig.
But didn't Chef come back? I mean, Bill Chef came back. I mean, he
did come back.
Okay, but you still stayed, or did they say see you?
No, there was just one person for that job. Bill made that job his own. He and Dave are so tight; they're like brothers. So he made that job his own. So eventually he came back, and and when I left, and it's true, he said to me, he said, you've had 5 years at this show now. You'll be just fine. I did a bunch of pilots for MTV in New York. Then I got an offer from Politically Incorrect to finally join their staff.
As a writer, not as the warm-up.
That's what got me out to LA. That's why when I moved to LA, 2002, to write for that show.
What stands out to me most about this, Gabe Abelson, is that it took Bill Chef 5 years to write his book. That's what's standing out to. He's a slow writer, that guy. So this is what I want to understand.
He may have written a second. I do know he wrote a second. It may have been during that time. I'm not sure, but I think he just wanted some time off too.
Could have been a trilogy. We don't know what it is. It could be an encyclopedia set. It's a nice man, Bill. Very nice man. And I recently, God, I hope people know Adrienne Tolsch. I got to perform with her a lot in Florida and her before she passed, and we did a tribute to her at the Friars Club, and I got to do that, be a part of that. She was a broad, baby, a broad.
She was a broad. She was so supportive and really a sweet, wonderful, talented, super talented woman.
Love her.
Yep.
So, a lot of comics and people, you talk about the fax comic. People are always, comics are always like, how do I submit a joke? How do I submit a joke? Getting that fax number is also a bit of gold, isn't it? Like you have to know somebody to give you that fax number, right?
Well, you have to so-called, so to speak, pass auditions in that sense. In that I didn't just get that fax job. I had to send Chef a bunch of jokes, even though, he knew my stand-up didn't mean anything. Stand-up, and we can talk about this, stand-up and late night, 2 completely different languages.
On that note, I want to say to everybody watching this is such a great lesson in the back rooms of comedy, writing, late night. Gabe Abelson, 5-time Emmy-nominated Letterman, Politically Incorrect. Share this. Start a watch party. We have a lot of cool things to talk about. Just share it. And also, this is my commercial break.
I did do that.
It's my commercial break. I want people to, if you want to support the show, this is my work now that now Broadway is on hiatus till January, which means the clubs are likely on a hiatus until January. You can support it PayPal or Venmo. And I also have a store because, I don't want to hate people. They make me hate them. I'm all about love. The Don't Make Me Hate You masks right there. They're really fun. They always get a little bit of a comment when I'm out and about. And I have the entire store. So you can just go to Mo Langan. We got t-shirts, coasters, get cool in the waves of the pool. We got it all going right there. So be supportive if you can to keep this all going. I really do appreciate that. And also I have to let you know that today's show is brought to you by one Mr. Jimmy Tingle. Jimmy, a great politician, comic, political commentator. They're doing a big benefit Friday in honor of a man named Barry Crimmins. And Barry, I'm trying to get this off you guys so you can see the full .com thing. I don't know what's happening. There's a lot going on when you're doing your own tech, okay, you guys? Is that weird? I can't get the .com off. Oh, there we go. Barry Crimmins. Barry Crimmins has gone to God. He did a lot to protect children. He talked about his own sexual assault. And Jimmy will be hosting this on Friday. Go to jimmytingle.com. And also on the show will be, so this is Jimmy Tingle. And on the show will also be Paula Poundstone and Dennis Leary, and so many other great, talented people. $40, jimmytingle.com. And Jimmy, thank you for supporting the show this week. A big shout out to you. We really appreciate it. And I will be putting my interview of Jimmy back on Friday. So anyway, back with my guest, Emmy-nominated late-night writer, Gabe Abelson. So let's pick up. I have to do that was business. That was a little.
Absolutely, got to do business.
That's my business, baby. All right, so let's talk about this. So you had to, it just seems so challenging to get to the fax line where you get to submit your jokes. First, you got to get your jokes to the people that will let you get your jokes to them. This is like a riddle. Explain that more.
Well, I sort of had went in the back door in both cases because I was doing warm up. I knew Scott Carter, so getting on the fax team was just, I was there every day. And the same thing with Adrian sending me to Chef. I sent him my jokes, and he said, "Okay, these are really funny," and joined the fax team. And there's something special about Letterman. To this day, I still write in his voice. And I also realized I wanted to be a stand-up since I was about 14. And I've been on the road, like I said, for about 15 years. I was headlining, but I had no national TV, but not network TV.
Yeah, I got you.
This happened so quickly when late night, relatively, I realized, holy shit, can I curse? I did, I guess. Here is something that I do probably better than stand-up because I've gotten to a much higher level in a very, very short period of time. And it was a skill I didn't even know I had. So I always suggest that comics at least try this because it's the quickest way to get your foot in the door in terms of, if you write a screenplay, it can take you a year, 2 years. You write a sitcom, take you a while. But to write a packet for a show doesn't take that long once you know what to do. You have to know what to do.
But you also have to know who to get it to and how to get it to them. That seems to be the biggest block for people. You can come up with your package, but how do you get it to the right people? See?
There are a number of ways.
You knew people.
There are a number of ways to do that. First of all, it helps to be a comic because I've heard about gigs from comics at comedy clubs before my agents even heard about them sometimes. Mm-hmm. And the other way is, you find out the address of the show, you find out who the head writer is, and you send a packet with your jokes. You can send it certified, whatever, so they have to sign for it. And if your stuff is really good, they'll get back to you. If it's, but you really have to knock them out. It's why, I work with a lot of people who try to get into the NBC Writers Program, which is a program for people starting out that want to get in late night. And a lot of them come to me and say, I wish I had come to you earlier. Not that I have any talent. It's just I've been doing this for so damn long and been deconstructing it for so long. There's certain red flags in a packet that will get it tossed in the garbage right away. And there's certain things that will catch the reader's eye, the head writer's eye. So that's what I help people do is put together a packet.
Okay, first of all, to say you don't have talent, from going from a stand-up to a warm-up act to the head monologue writer at Letterman, I'm calling bullshit. So the other thing is, I was reading that you say, and I understand this as a performer, big difference between writing for what you put on stage to what you put on late night. Let's talk about the differences.
Yeah. So the main difference, and I tell this to comics, especially last night I taught a class through Flappy Comedy Club, a Zoom class, and a lot of people had I in their joke. I did this or whatever, and I said that's stand-up. There are exceptions to every rule. Like Letterman used to use himself in the joke a lot. He was the boob. He was the punchline. But for the most part, it's the opposite type of humor because stand-up is all about peeling back the layers and baring your soul. That's who really the strongest comics are. Yes, there are the Jerry Seinfelds that are all about observation, but certainly for the last 20 years or so, it's all been about who you are. Whereas monologue is nothing about who you are. It's all external. It's all observing the world around you and showing the ironies and the inconsistencies and pointing out everything going on except in your own life.
Yeah.
So it's a very different discipline. And half the joke in monologue writing is written for you. You're just taking a straight statement, which is often just a conversational way of using the headline, and then writing a joke based on that. So stand-up is sort of by inspiration. You have to be going through life going, oh my God, that's funny. I never thought of that. And then, either write it down or put it in your voice recorder. Right. Whereas monologue writing is by perspiration. You have to sit down, say, okay, I'm going to take 2 hours to write at least 20 jokes. And I go through, I have all my sources of news that I find are the most fertile for me to get jokes off of. And then I have a process now that I use that sort of helps prevent writer's block, allows me to churn out more jokes that I share with my students.
So so go ahead, I cut you off, sorry.
I want to say also it's all about economy of words. Now, yes, in stand-up you want to be concise, but an and or an or may not make the difference, whereas in a monologue joke, every single word is essential or should be essential. All the non-essential words need to be taken out of that joke. And I think that's one of the harder things for people to learn is you really don't need this word. So even if I write a simple 3-line monologue joke, I'll probably do 20 drafts of it before I finish it. And I don't mean drafts as in rewriting the whole thing, but I mean in terms of languaging, switching this word out for this word. No, that comes too early in the setup. For instance, this is something people don't know when they apply for these jobs. This essential information in the setup in a monologue joke needs to be at the end of the setup so they remember it for the punch word, which needs to come at the end of the punchline. You need to turn the corner in a monologue joke. It needs to drop like a roller coaster at the very, very end. Some people, too many comics, try to write funny lines as the punchline. That doesn't work in monologue. It's all got to be based on surprise. So because of that, if you write, let's just say, for an example, I don't even have a joke. President Trump met with Kim Jong-un at the Royal Palace at 12 noon on Tuesday. Well, that's the opposite way that punchline that setup should go, because Trump and Kim are going to be the focal point of that punchline. So you would need to start by saying at 12 noon on Sunday at the Imperial Palace or whatever they call it, President Trump met with Kim Jong-un. It's simple structural things that people don't teach, although my good friend, Joe Toplin, wrote a book. It's the only book on writing for late night television. I'll give a little plug for his book that I use as a text for my class.
Put that down so people who are interested could see that. I'll write that there. What is his name?
His name is Joe Toplin, Toplyn. And the book is called Comedy Writing for Late Night TV.
Okay, there you go, folks.
So one last thing, another thing, I get these jokes that are 6 lines long, a monologue joke. Nobody will tell you, and again, this is something nobody taught me. I learned the hard way, but it's what I share from my experience. A monologue joke should really be 3 lines or less on the paper, because the host may spin it into a 30-second story. Letterman was, I think, the best ever at this, and he would hit the punchline exactly, but he would take us on a ride. Are there exceptions? Absolutely. Like I wrote a joke that Letterman did. One thing I loved about Dave is if he liked a joke on a certain holiday, he would do it every year on that holiday. So it was one less joke I needed to worry about. There was one he did every year about the marathon that I wrote. I said, today was a New York City marathon. And this is what I mean about a joke being over 3 lines by necessity. Joke was, in case you don't know how the New York Marathon works, the runners start in Staten Island. They cross the Verrazano Bridge. They go all the way around Brooklyn. Then they go up through Queens. They cross the bridge. They go into the Bronx, come back down through the Bronx, cross the bridge into Manhattan, and finally finish in Central Park. It's the same way cab drivers get you in from LaGuardia. So,
yeah, circuitous.
But that joke, it's circuitous. It has to be a 5 or 6 line joke.
Because
so every time there's a rule, I'll say there are exceptions.
Gabe,
but this is how
I wanted to talk to you about with this. First of all, you're going to tell me the first joke you ever wrote for Letterman. You said you remember that.
Yeah. In fact, when I wrote it, excuse me, I get a call from Chef saying, he's saying Dave loved this particular joke. In fact, he loved it so much, he wants to save it for the Friday show. And so he said, so make sure you watch on Friday. Of course, I watched every night to see if I had a joke on. And so, I was on retainer already. So the joke was, and again, I think it's far from my best joke, but for some reason it tickled him. And he starts out by saying, God, I love this next joke. This is one of my favorite jokes. And of course, as a comic, I'm going, no, don't say that. That's the kiss of death, telling them how funny it is. But, it's Dave. It doesn't matter. It would matter in a club if I said, hey, this is my favorite joke. They're going to sit there, So the joke was, this was when they weren't sure. They found the photo of OJ wearing the Bruno Mali shoes at a football game on the sidelines. And then they weren't sure about it. Then they found like 20 photos of him. So the joke was they found 20 photos of OJ wearing those Bruno Mali shoes. And this is interesting. If you riffle through the photos really quickly, you can actually see OJ doing the Macarena. And so then it's not a good I don't want to say it's not a good joke.
Yeah.
Well, then Paul and the band starts playing the Macarena. Dave goes in the audience, gets an elderly woman to come up and start doing the Macarena. And so it was really, it was funny. And I really appreciated Bill calling me to tell me, that Dave, no, I was not on retainer. That was my first joke. And then it was down for a while.
Sorry?
No, I said that was my first joke. And then, you go through waves. Some jokes, some nights you get a lot on, then you get nothing on. If I got nothing on for 2 nights, I would freak out. And, because you just don't know till you watch the show.
Yeah, but it turned into a whole bit. But I know what you're saying, because I used to be a commentator years ago on Bloomberg, on satirical news. It was very different. Like, you'd take the headline and you'd go with it's just like a comment. You had to just get to it. Whereas in stand-up, I might have the setup punch, but I'm very emotionally driven. So I have to go, what do I feel in between the setup and the punch? The anger, the frustration,
Exactly.
It's very.
What am I angry about? What am I scared about? None of that applies with late night. But exactly. But that's
so it would be more a headline, like you were just saying. Give some examples here about. I'm so excited talking to you, and I think people who aren't even in the business are going, "Wow, this is so cool." I didn't know how hard it was to write a joke. People are saying, "I love it." Oh, my cousin is watching from England. Hello, Helen. Oh, really great. We got a nice group of people tuning in. Thank you. I hope you're sharing this. Just hit share, start a watch party, you guys. And if you're digging what you're seeing, feel free to support the show. I mean, you can, you don't have to. It doesn't matter. I'm only out of work for 5 years. So the thing is, Gabe, it's such a pig fuck out there. It's so crazy. I was so down yesterday, and somebody who doesn't know me well Facebooked me. She goes, why don't you do like a show online? I'm like, I think that's a good idea. Maybe I'll do a show online that I've been doing for 3 months. Okay.
And you're great at it.
Oh, God. Well, I was a broadcaster for years, but thank you. Thank you. So, and you're great at what you do. So we were talking about the writing of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you have some jokes that you've written that are current. And I think it would be great for people to hear what you've created.
Yeah, since the COVID thing, it's awful, but it's great for writing monologue jokes. As long as nobody gets hurt. One of the first things I tell my students, not to go into professorial mode here, is
Please.
If you're submitting a packet, this is another big mistake people make. Stay away from what I call first date subjects. Race, religion, sexual orientation, death, disease. There's probably more. Because why have your packet rejected because of content? You don't want the head writer to go, well, this joke could never get on network. Garbage.
Yeah.
All stuff that could be used. Have it rejected because it's not funny enough. That's something that's sort of out of your control. But don't make these mistakes that are avoidable.
Show your skill. Show that you get the premise. You get the idea. You understand what's happening. Okay.
Right. So, for instance, a COVID joke I wrote is, everyone is so paranoid with COVID. In fact, earlier today, Alexa told me I was standing too close. So the way I approach a lot of these jokes is I'll think of everyone's paranoid, and I ask myself, how paranoid are they? Almost like a Johnny Carson thing. And then that will lead me to the punchline. I'll just exaggerate something just to give you an idea. Let's see. So I tried to write one, the really challenging thing with the protests and the riots. There's nothing funny there. So I was thinking, how can I get away with a joke about that where nobody gets hurt, really, where it becomes something that doesn't victimize anyone. So I had one joke, a silly joke. I said, it's a very hot climate we're living through right now. People are protesting everywhere. In fact, over in Pennsylvania, Dutch country, I saw 2 Amish women turning over a buggy. So, it's silly. It's a very sort of Johnny Carson, I saw a woman turn over a buggy. But nobody gets hurt. And the first way I wrote that joke, talking about drafts, is I saw two women burning a buggy. A little more violent. I did like the alliteration of burning a buggy, but I didn't think it was as funny physically as two women in bonnets turning over a buggy. So these are the kind of things that I'll go through, the choices I'll make before I actually finish the joke. And I think that's, again, something I would tell people starting out is getting your funny idea down on the page is not writing your joke. Your joke becomes the rewriting. They say this with screenwriting too. Afterward, the shaping of the joke, all the drafts. That's where the real work is, and that's where you have to do the most work, is shaping it and getting it perfect, getting the surprise at the end of the joke, not giving it away till then.
So something like this, Gabe, I'm just using this as an example for those who are watching, and it's not a perfectly written joke, but I'm just to reiterate your point, and I could be off on this. So during the virus, so I wrote a joke like this. It's not, I'm just paraphrasing now, but because of the golf courses, as soon as the virus hit, golf courses closed. Had they closed sooner, my marriage might have lasted. But boom, boom. Now that's an I that's on the stage. Now something like that you would flip, and again, paraphrasing the word, the economy of words is not there. But if I had a talk show, we were like a show, I would, well, that part is, but I would say the golf courses were some of the first to close. Now, how many marriages would have been saved had that happened sooner? That would be the difference between I and then everybody out there. That's what you're trying to say, that kind of.
Now here, let me take that joke and tweak it the way I would tweak it.
Yes.
Instead of saying, my marriage would have been saved had I done it a lot sooner. What's the surprise? The surprise is my marriage would have been saved.
Right.
So you now have to flip that and say, if it had happened sooner, my marriage could have been saved.
Well, that's how I wrote it, right?
Yeah, because you just said, had my marriage been saved, had it happened a lot sooner.
Oh,
so
no,
I'm just saying,
yeah,
the surprise has to come last.
Right. My marriage,
yeah. Well, you know that. Yeah.
I got you. Flip it. But I'm just paraphrasing. But that would be too personal to do as a late night talk show host. You would have to say, come from a woman. Do you know how many marriages might have been saved? Or
exactly. That's exactly it. And there are exceptions. Like I said with Letterman, for me, maybe my favorite moment was not my favorite moment when he had his quintuple bypass surgery, but when he came back to the show, he closed with a joke that was one of mine that was across the top of the New York Post the next day. And that was a really exciting moment for me. And again, it's not a particularly great joke, but it's one that only Dave could do. He said, when I found out I needed a quintuple bypass, my entire career flashed before my eyes. And honestly, it was mostly awkward silences.
Come on, that's good. That's
Dave's self-deprecating thing. And so I just found those so easy to write, I really loved writing for him.
Well, that's so his voice. A lot of you are making comments, and if I can't see your name on StreamYard, unless you go to StreamYard.com/Facebook, I can see you on my iPhone. But if you just go to StreamYard.com Facebook and click on the blue button, I'll be able to see your comments right here and your name. I cannot see your name. Somebody just said that they love your explanation of skill and craft. I see Matt, he's saying he loves your Alexa joke. People, I'd love to be on your show, Maureen. All right, well, I don't know who you are, so don't be pissed at me. All right, so I don't know. They got to go on the .com. Fascinating stuff here. It's just so great to talk to you. I love it. I've heard you, but we're not done. We have more. Do you have a few more?
Good. I have a couple more COVID jokes.
Hell yeah, you do.
They're tightening, and actually this now becomes relevant again. They're going to tighten the lockdown even more. And this, of course, was written a couple months ago when there were no cars on the road in LA, no people in the streets, and they're so careful. I mean, in fact, now 7-Eleven is only letting in robbers 2 at a time. To me, what I like about that joke and why I think Dave would have done it, even though it's not a great joke, is the fact that they're letting them in. That cracks me up. There's certain things in jokes sometimes that it's not even the joke itself. It's just part of it that I really, that makes me laugh. Then I said, people have been locked home so long, Pornhub is running out of material. Now they're just showing old Miss America bathing suit contests. So
Letterman, all this. These are so, I can so hear Letterman saying these.
That's what I'm saying. I can't, and this is one, and Letterman, Carson was his idol. So I try to write in Dave's voice, which is also Carson's voice. Yeah. So I'll do it as Carson because I just love Carson too. I get home from Ralph's today, and I hear it's less dangerous to be around strangers than it is to touch your groceries. So right now my chickpeas are in quarantine, and it's just chickpeas in quarantine.
Yeah, that's good.
Stupid. It's dumb.
But it's fun. It's silly. It's in the person's voice. That's what they're supposed to do. Well, silly's good.
Yeah, it's silly. It's silly.
Gabe Abelson is my guest. He's written for so many late night shows, from Bill Maher, David Letterman. He's 5-time Emmy nominated, and he's worked on Emmy award-winning shows.
That must have been some clerical error.
You're full of shit. So what else I wanted to ask you? There's a lot of things going on here. You said that you got hired in your 30s, which is considered, an aged man for the times.
Very late.
Is it still that way? I mean, is it just they still want the young kids in there? They don't. The ageism is there.
They do. I'll tell you the one show that was an exception to that rule that I've worked on. The only late night show that was really an exception to that was The Tonight Show with Leno. There were people on the staff that were older than I was. Of course, there were people that were younger than I was, but pretty much everybody was around my age, maybe a little younger, and they were, like I said, older. There were guys there. I was there in my 40s. There were guys there in their 50s, and so, I mean, if I was hosting a show, I would want both. I would want very young people with their finger on the pulse of new media, everything that's going on in that world, and older people that had really crafted their technique. I mean, I think I'm a better writer now than I was at Letterman or Leno. I think you just keep getting better.
That's the thing I don't understand, because you teach current late night staff how to write for late night. Where's the friggin' irony in that? I mean, come on, you got to be kidding me. They're hiring you, a skilled, experienced man, to write for people who don't have the skill to write that you do. It makes me enraged. I don't want. Hello. I don't want to hate people. They make me hate them. Available at molangan.com. All right. Anyway, it's insane. And again, too, we hear this all the time, but I can't help but see it and notice it. Where are the women in comedy? And don't tell me they're getting there, because there's two of them. I love Laurie Kilmartin. She's a friend of mine. She writes for Conan. She's fantastic. She has worked like a dog. I mean, that woman, and she can't do enough to help the other gals in the business. But like, I watch Bill Maher still on HBO. What's it called now? I don't even know. It's every Friday night. I don't know. Real time with Bill Maher. Sometimes he can come. This is my opinion. Come across a little, snarky. But I love the writing. I love the writing on the show. But then I look at the list, and it's all guy. And to do commentating, you don't have to be a guy or a gal. If you have that skill to take the news of the day and get the punchlines from it. But I'm kind of sick of that bullshit. I just am. But the other thing, not him, I like the show, but you get what I'm saying. The other thing, though, is Lori told me this, Brian Kiley, who also writes for Conan. Mm-hmm. I read where you said this, to do a monologue and just hope they take one or two of your jokes, you're crafting 50 a day.
Absolutely. And when I go over my student stuff, and I don't pull punches because it doesn't help them. Yeah. I always tell them this story because they once asked Seinfeld who his idol was as a comic, coming up. And I guess they thought he would say Pryor, Carlin, someone like that. And he said Ted Williams. And they said, Ted Williams, a baseball player for the Boston Red Sox? He said, yeah. They said, why? And he said, because Ted Williams failed 2 out of every 3 times he tried to do his job, which is hit. He failed 2 out of every 3 times, and yet is considered the greatest pure hitter in the 150-year history of baseball. I'm paraphrasing. But to me, that really puts it in perspective. Like, here's the best of the best in the history of baseball, and he's failing 2 out of every 3 times. And I think it's something that beginning writers need to keep in mind. Most of what you write you will not use. And so if I was like back when I was writing packets, if I knew I had to write 2 pages of monologue jokes, which was about 13 jokes, I would write 60 to get 13 I was happy with.
But that is something, that is a wheel that is spinning all day. Like, you just have to get into a zone, I imagine, and just be like, what are you going through? All the papers, all the newspapers, all the headlines, different, what do you tell me?
Well, the first place I go is the Drudge Report. Even though his politics couldn't be more different than mine, there's something about their headlines and their stories that are, and maybe because they take an angle that I find there's a lot of meat on the bones there. And then I'll go to the New York Post. Same thing, very different politics.
Oh, yeah, the Post has great headlines.
Sensationalistic, great headlines. Then for the little weird news stories, like when Jay Leno says, you see this, a woman in Indianapolis found a finger in her chili at Wendy's. Those I find on a site called fark.com. F-A-R-K is in kitchen. And just the teasers to the story are great. That's where you get those little human interest stories. But another mistake beginners make is they'll take a headline and write a joke out of it that's only funny had you read that headline, had you seen that word. That doesn't work. You've got to go for at least, I would say, a 96, 97% recognition rate of the story. And if not the story has to be self-explanatory. When Leno says a woman found a finger in her chili at Wendy's, you don't need to know anymore. But right. Like I had a student this week, and I'm not pointing fingers because I don't even remember which student it was, something about them finding orange dust on a sidewalk and authorities being baffled and then turning it to Trump. Well, it almost sounds like that setup was created for the sake of getting to a Trump joke. We don't know what this orange dust is. It's not immediately evident. We can pause for an eighth of a second at the end of a monologue joke to get it, but we can't have a mental pause during the setup.
Because then they're thinking about the setup and they're not hearing the punch.
They're questioning and so therefore they're not listening. The punchline's falling on deaf ears because they haven't absorbed the information instantly. And can I just give you a brief diagram of sort of how this is?
We're loving every minute of this. Are you guys not loving this? Are you out of your mind? Come on, this is one of the best chats I've had on Hanging with Langan. Seriously,
God bless you.
No, Thank you. No, God bless you.
So I wrote a joke. I was with Dave during one Clinton administration and part of Bush's administration. And when the Monica scandal broke, we usually ended with a Monica joke every night, which Dave has since expressed regret. I've since expressed regret, because it just wasn't fair to make her the butt of the joke. But it was always a joke about the sexual act that happened because it was made clean enough for CBS. So the audience is always going to laugh louder at a dirty joke because it's forbidden on networks. So we would start with he was very technical about how he did it. We would start with the closer, find the strongest joke for the closer, which usually was a dirty joke. And then he would pair up jokes 6 and 7. He did 8 jokes on the same topic, jokes 4 and 5 on the same topic. And the first 3 would be throwaways. Like Letterman would start by saying, it's raining, it's pouring outside, coming to work. I was walking through Central Park and I saw a squirrel scotch guarding his nuts. Just a throwaway like that. And also funny because we know Dave's not walking to work. But the joke, the joke that I wrote that closed this one monologue, and again, my apologies, but I just use it as an illustration. There was one point after Clinton was caught where a couple months later, he hired 2 spiritual advisors to come and pray with him in the White House. And, it's a typical empty sort of politician's gesture of contrition. So I said, there's got to be a joke here. So the joke I ended up writing was President Clinton hired 2 spiritual advisors to come and pray with him every week. That's great. Just so we need more people in the Oval Office on their knees. So again, it's not. So the original way I wrote that joke, by the way, was just so we need more people on their knees in the Oval Office. I then realized that's right. Knees is the punch word. It's got to come last. So how does that joke get written? And this is 98% of monologue jokes are written this way. And Joe talks about this in his book. You find the handles. The handles are, I know it's going to be about that sexual act. The other handle are the spiritual advisors. So now I have to figure out where they meet. So I go through sort of a mental Rolodex, which is really dating myself to even mention that. And I also suggest beginning writers actually make 2 lists, on the page. and I try to find where they come together. So I'm thinking spiritual advisors, they wear robes. I mean, there's a tie-in with Monica's blue dress with the stain, and it's not quite a strong enough tie-in. They pray, and as soon as I get to pray on their knees, that's that light bulb moment, and the joke is written. So the problem is too many beginning monologue writers try to find a funny punchline rather than try to find handles and work on an association. And at that point, the punchline sort of writes itself. Then it becomes about the tweaks.
And that's what's so fun too. You know what I love looking up, Gabe Abelson? I just love thesauruses. I just love putting words into thesauruses just to get the brain opening up to so many possibilities of a synonym for a word. If you're just like, not right. And, you go, and it just leads to so much. I love all that stuff. I love words so much. I'll get you nowhere. But anyway, I got you for it. Freaking, I should have danced with poles while I still had the body to do so. Whatever. Another problem with semicolon. Shit. What?
You're never too old.
No, not when I go down to Century Village in Florida. No. Hot chick there. But a couple things that you said, and this is such a treat for all of us to have you here today.
For me as well.
Thank you. I've heard so many great things about you. So like, oh, it's so nice to have you here. Okay, so you talked about a sexual joke. And of course, you can get away with it because people, the mind goes to prayers and knees. It doesn't, the prayer kind of softens the knees, but the knees brings out the sexual. When people are new writers, you're skilled. You've been around the block 8,000 times. When you're new, trying to do a sexual joke, you say is like, don't go there yet. Like you don't have those chops to some of these newbies putting in their packages.
No, I think if it's a joke like that is TV ready, I think that's fine. I just, you don't want to cross the line. You just want to use common sense. Even though after I tell students this, they'll still submit a joke on race or on sexual orientation, or the transgender community or something. And I'll say, no, you know what? Once you got the job and you're on staff, absolutely submit it. The worst they'll do is just not do that joke. But in your packet, you want all of those 2 pages of jokes to be ones where they say, this could go on the air tonight.
Right.
Not, this would never get on the air.
Exactly.
And I'll give you, for instance, so this is sort of, it's not even a sexual orientation joke, but a joke that you could do that you could put in a packet and wouldn't turn them off along those lines. And it was one that Dave did every Halloween. And the joke was, Halloween in New York is really something to see. Only on Halloween in the West Village can you see a man in high heels and a dress on his way to pick up a costume. So again, the punch word at the very end, the bottom drops out, and it's not really making fun of anybody's sexual orientation. It's a joke that can get on network. It's right. Nobody gets hurt. So I always tell people, just use good judgment. If you have any reservations like, I'm not sure this could get on, don't include it. Write a joke that can get on the air.
Exactly. Good point. All right. So where do people follow you? Let me put your .com social media stuff up there. And I know you're teaching classes where, in LA?
I teach a lot of private sessions. I work with both comics and late night writers, from beginning to people already on staff. I work with one of my favorite people to work with is a terrific comic named Emma Willman. And that's not a teaching session. Emma's much funnier than I could ever hope to be. And it was actually Joe Toplin, the author of that book, who sent her to me, of which I'm extremely grateful, because he doesn't work with comics. And he said, but here's the guy that you should go to, which I really appreciate. And she came to me wanting to put a Colbert set together. This about 3 or 4 years ago. We worked together very intensively, and she got the set. And then she got a second Colbert set, and I think she's had a Netflix special, and she got a semi-recurring role on My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Emma's hilarious, and her thing is she came to me specifically for structure. Like I said, she's 100 times funnier than I am. So when I work with Emma, when I work with more advanced people like that, I hate to even call them students, it becomes more of a writing brainstorming session.
Collaboration.
I work with people on whatever level that they are at that moment.
What about this, Gabe Abelson? People,
so they can also email me if they want at gabe.abelson@gmail.com.
Stand by. Let's add this so everybody has it right here. Say again, Gabe.
Gabe, Gabe Abelson, Abelson @gmail.com. And the last thing I'll say on that is the interesting thing is the people that come back to me the most are the people that are the furthest advanced in their career, like Emma. It's the people that come on and say, I got it. That I'm not saying that they don't have it, but they usually are the people that are beginners. Look, Pacino was still going to Lee Strasberg. Tennis players have coaches. The best hitters in baseball have hitting coaches because they know there might be a hitch in their swing that they're not seeing. As great as they are, even though that hitting coach is nowhere near as good as that hitter is, they still know that they need that other eye that's going to see it and look at it objectively and has enough experience to give them tips and work with them to improve what they're already brilliant at.
Are you going to be doing any Zoom teaching or on the .com?
Absolutely.
That's
I'm actually building my own school right now, but I do Zoom. That's why I give you my email. I do Zoom classes through Flappers Comedy Club. That's a class. And then I do private sessions with people over Skype where they send me their material a week beforehand. I review it. I take every note. I track all the changes in red. So they have a roadmap after. And so by the time we do a 1-hour session a week later, I'm as familiar with their jokes as they are. I've made all my notes, all my tweaks. And then, so there's no wasted time in that session. It's just going over every word of every joke.
I keep wanting to talk to you, and I know we've got to wrap this up in a moment, but the other thing, you worked alone with Letterman when Bill Sheff took some time off. Mm-hmm. You worked with Bill Maher. You worked with Leno. So when you're working with Letterman alone, usually a writer's room, you're bouncing off each other. Isn't that the case? So how would that work one-on-one?
It is. It was completely different than any other show I worked on because I was not in the writer's room. It was my own sort of fiefdom there in the corner, although I was really the only writer that had, as Bill was, that had FaceTime with Dave because it was just me, Dave, and Tony the cue card guy in rehearsal every day. So I would get all the jokes in the faxers, plus I'd write 20 of my own, whatever, and I'd narrow it down to about 60 jokes that I would give to Dave out of about 300. He would check off the ones he'd like. His assistant would bring them back to me. I'd give them to Tony. He'd put them on cue cards. I would usually find 3 or 4 that I thought were even funnier that he didn't pick. And so I would have Tony put those on cards. Sometimes I could talk him into it. Sometimes I couldn't. And we would quite often bet on jokes. He would say, well, that's not going to work. And I would only bet because it was always $100. I'd always bet only on jokes that I knew were bulletproof because Dave would go out and because he wasn't into it, not that he would purposely tank the joke, but maybe not sell it as much as
right.
And then we would have this fun little thing going on there on the side. But it was thrilling. It was terrifying because it was David Letterman. And it was an amazing experience and gave me such great preparation for every job that was to come afterward.
People are asking, somebody asked me, is it possible today for somebody over 40 to ever get on a fax line? Or do they have to, because writing's writing, I imagine.
Writing is writing, and my guess is it's probably like voiceovers, where it doesn't really matter what age you are. Is there ageism in acting? There definitely is. If you're doing voiceovers, probably doesn't matter as much. I mean, yes, there are going to be roles for older people too, but that doesn't matter. In late night, if you're a faxer, yes. If your jokes stand on their own, they're really strong, I don't think it matters what age you are.
I think what you have to do is get somebody really young and hot looking to send your material over. So they're like, wow, what is that like show? There's a show that's been going on forever where I think Steve Martin was in it, where you say the lines to the guy and he gets the gal, whatever. Just want to give one more shout out, you guys, a couple things here, a little bit of business. If you want to support the show, we have all my Don't Make Me Hate You products. We have the masks, t-shirts, all kinds of t-shirts, the masks. Just go to molangan.com or don'tmakemehateyou.com. Also sponsoring the show this week, Jimmy Tingle, the wonderful, talented, gifted Jimmy Tingle. They're doing an online tribute at the Ding Ho Comedy Club. It was a Ding Ho Comedy Club. It's a tribute to Barry Crimmins. He's gone to God. He's up in the sky, but it's a fundraiser for his wife, his widow. On the show, Jimmy Tingle will be hosting. Paula Poundstone will be there. Dennis Leary. It's just such a group of people. So you can go to, let me show you all this. Just go to jimmytingle.com. Their suggested donation of $40. It's a 3-hour show. So go enjoy that support. They're doing good work over there. And Barry Crimmins, who they're honoring, did a lot of work to help children of sexual abuse and to make sure they're protected. And he himself survived that. So, I mean, it is touching and it is good work. And if you want to write with Mr. Gabe Abelson, who has done it friggin' all, just so you know, late night talk show writer, 5-time Emmy nominated, just go right here, Gabe Abelson at gmail.com. Or if you lose it, you can't find it, just Facebook me and I'll make sure you get that. All right.
Okay. Facebook me too.
And Facebook. Oh, here, please stand by. Go to the Facebook, the Instagram, and the Twitter. Gabe Abelson on Facebook, Instagram at Gabelson, and Twitter Gabelson #. Okay, tomorrow, you guys, I want to let you know, Jennifer Peterman, she is a broad, she's a Renaissance woman, a writer, a poet. She was started in stand-up, and she's a professional server at the top restaurants in New York City. And man, does she have some tales to tell. And that'll be tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. You hang tight, Gabe. I'm going to say goodbye, and I will see all of you tomorrow. See you around like a donut. Mwah.